Hello, YouTube. It's Andrew2 here, and it is time. We have the 1.1 patch notes for the last Epoch. And holy cow, it is a long list of patch notes. I've decided I'm just going to go through each patch note just to kind of clarify exactly what everything is. I've mostly played all of these classes, and wow, it is extensive. When they said hundreds of changes, they actually meant hundreds of changes. They're not just... Holy smokes. Holy smokes, look at all this. Enemies, MTX, visual effects, enemies, other bug fixes. Oh! It is just so large. So, we're going to go through it. We have to. It was released 18 minutes ago, which was around, 9 or 10 o'clock their time. Okay. Greetings, travelers. It's Patch Notes Day. The team is incredibly excited to bring this patch to the community, and we have a ton of awesome features to share over the last few weeks. You've seen what's new and quality live posts, as well as a smattering of announcements, including our Lore Hunt event and Twitch drops. Heading into the weekend, we are excited to share the official patch notes for 1.1 Harbingers of Ruin. These patch notes are massive, so we suggest taking a look at the developer overview video from Director Game Judd. To prepare the servers, on July 8th, we'll be shutting down our servers 24 hours before the patch, starting on July 8th at 9 o'clock a.m. Okay, so let's watch the patch overview, just so that, because they recommended that we watch it, so let's just watch this.
Greetings, travelers. I'm Judd Kobler, Game Director for Last Epoch, and I'm thrilled to announce that Last Epoch's first post-launch cycle, Harbingers of Ruin, Cycle 1.1, is just around the corner, arriving on July 9th. We're very excited to share all of the awesome new content that we've been working on. Let's dive in for a sneak peek at everything coming your way.
Woo.
In Cycle 1.1, you'll be facing off against our newest Pinnacle Boss, Aberoth, the Herald of Oblivion, and his Legion of Harbingers. Aberoth is a fearsome foe who has selected his strongest legionnaires to hunt down Terra's champions and give them a choice. Either join his side and dedicate themselves to Orobyss, or perish. While exploring and fighting your way through Terra, you will frequently encounter these fallen warriors that have been defeated by the Harbingers and tainted by corruption, waiting patiently to exact a revenge on other travelers. When interacting with these remains, choices will be given to acquire their previously equipped items, but the vengeful void will cause the remains to animate and attack. This forms the Nemesis System, where by clicking on a Nemesis, which appears as swirling pieces of armor above a slain warrior, brings up a menu where you can see 4 items that are obtainable. You're given 3 options. 1, you can banish the Nemesis entirely, so the next one you encounter has brand new items. 2, you can challenge the Nemesis, causing the equipment to coalesce into a powerful foe that drops its displayed items when slain. Or 3, you can empower the Nemesis. This will result in it challenging you, but escaping if you were able to defeat it. The next time you find a Nemesis event, it will be more challenging, but the displayed items will have been carried over and upgraded in various ways. This can be done a maximum of 2 times. Empowering a Nemesis can upgrade its items in many ways that are impossible through the normal crafting system. It can add silk affixes up to tier 7, raise forging potential above its normal maximum, and turn rare items into exalted ones. It can also upgrade unique items, adding legendary potential to them, or turn them directly into legendaries with random affixes. At higher levels, Nemesis can spawn a special unique, the Egg of the Forgotten, which can be replaced by one of your own uniques as long as it has no legendary potential or Weaver's Will, allowing you to empower that unique with the system. To stop the threat of the Harbingers, you'll need to work with the Forgotten Knight to devise a plan to take out their leader, Aberoth, Last Epoch's brand new Pinnacle Boss, and the source of their power. You'll need to progress through the new in-game faction, the Forgotten Knights, to gain access to Aberoth himself, but only the strongest will have a chance of taking him down, gathering his spoils, and ending the Harbinger threat. The journey begins after completing the final level 90 non-empowered timeline and surviving a Harbinger's ambush for the first time. Harbingers will begin ambushing you when you defeat a timeline boss, extending the fight where they will use their abilities in combination with abilities of the previously defeated boss. If you're able to defeat the first Harbinger, you will take his eye to the Forgotten Knight, Orinthia, and be invited to join the Forgotten Knight's faction, which tracks your Harbinger's specific progress. You'll need to lure out increasingly powerful Harbingers across the empowered timelines through the Monolith of Fate. Once 10 different Harbingers are vanquished, you can spend a Harbinger Eye you've collected to enter the place where travelers are corrupted into Harbingers, the Altar of Oblivion. This is where you will challenge the Pinnacle Boss, Aberoth. To help tackle these challenging new threats, and because we've tested it and it's just way fun to use, we're introducing a new evade or dodge roll mechanic. While evade doesn't offer immunity frames or serve as a traversal skill, it's a crucial part of your survival toolkit, with 2 charges available from level 1. Unlike other skills, evade isn't swappable and lacks a skill tree, but its cooldown recovery speed increases as your character levels up. Furthermore, evade can be enhanced by various affixes and even unique items that dramatically modify its functionality. Having evade will allow us to design boss fights knowing that all players have a way to traverse out of harm's way quickly without having to choose to take a more powerful traversal ability on their action bar. 1.1 brings the most extensive balance updates of any patch ever, unlocking many exciting new build opportunities. We've updated skills, passives, and mechanics and can't wait to see what builds emerge as a result. For example, mana now regenerates while channeling on most channeled abilities, making skills like Warpath and Disintegrate awesome to build around. The Mage's Disintegrate skill tree has been updated and can now gain multiple stages of destruction. Minions are now tankier. The Sentinel's Shield Bash ability has received extensive updates. The Spellblade Mastery now has more access to Critical Strike. The Sorcerer has even more incentive to build high mana. Shaman and Forge Guard have received extensive updates to be more powerful and interesting. The Primalist Avalanche ability is no longer a channeled skill by default and can do things like proc Earthquake and Upheaval. And the Rogue's multi-shot has been buffed when used directly, alongside much more. See the patch notes for a full list of updates.
Woo.
And of course, with
Indeed we will.
challenging content and massive balance updates, we're introducing a large swath of awesome new uniques to hunt. For example, the Nihilist Amulet, last Epoch's first ever unique to have negative to positive roll ranges.
Hold on. Okay. 2 to all skills, 13 reduced mana regen, 1% more armor, 9% to all resistances, 17% current health, and ward loss when you evade, 1.6 seconds. Oh, wow. Reduced.
This large variance means that finding a well-rolled one will result in you obtaining a very powerful item. The Nihilist Amulet is extremely versatile and can be used in many builds. Meet the Monument of Protection. This Sentinel Shield counts as a one-handed axe and can be equipped with another shield, adding significant offense to shield-based skills and strong additional defenses.
Wow.
And the new Black Blade of Chaos. This powerful in-game two-hander changes the Blade Dancer's Lethal Mirage into a skill that can be used much more frequently, providing a potent and engaging new playstyle. There are 30 uniques coming with patch 1.1, so happy hunting. Let's talk about some of the existing system changes coming with patch 1.1. First off, we've added 2 new ranks to both Circle of Fortune and Merchant's Guild factions, and reduced the time it takes to reach the highest ranks. We've also revised their rank rewards, and there's now smoother progression in the items to access with Merchant's Guild, and we provided Circle of Fortune with ranks to receive more boss loot, experimental item affixes, and the final rank now completes the prophecy twice instead of just duplicating the reward itself. We're also working towards improving the Merchant's Guild Bazaar search feature, and plan to release those updates during the 1.1 patch as soon as possible. We're excited to announce that we're adding level ladders alongside arena ladders, which can be accessed both in-game and on the official Last Epoch website this patch. We're also adding timestamps on the arena ladder entries so that players are able to tell when an entry on the leaderboard was made. We've replaced boss dynamic damage reduction with a new boss board system, which solves a number of issues. This new system clearly represents boss's true health, makes health leech reliable, ensures players' damage output meets expectations, and there's no longer downsides to higher DPS builds. We have a few changes coming to the Monolith of Fate. First, Echoes now more consistently contain swarming and rare enemies to ensure that they're sufficiently populated and rewarding. We've heard your feedback that progressing through non-empowered timelines on alts is too time-consuming. In 1.1, you will be able to find the new Glyph of Envy, which siphons stability from your items to add to your timelines. The stability granted to uncompleted, non-empowered timelines is very high, allowing you to quickly progress through the unempowered monolith on alt characters. We've also made some changes to the Gaze of Orobyss mechanic found in empowered monoliths, which previously could be overly punishing. Not only were there diminishing returns at higher amounts of Gaze, you also lost all of it if you died to a Shade of Orobyss. In 1.1, every stack of Gaze of Orobyss always gives 12 corruption, but you can only use 4 at once, the rest carrying over to your next Echo Web. Additionally, when you die to a Shade of Orobyss, you now only lose a single stack. Also, in parties, everyone who has enough stability to get blessing and boss-specific rewards is also given 1 Gaze of Orobyss, making it easier for multiple people to progress corruption together in a party. Next, let's dive into the massive amount of quality of life additions that we have been working on with our community that you can expect to see in both Cycle and Legacy with the launch of Cycle 1.1, Harbingers of Ruin. In 1.1, all blessings that your character finds and can select from are stored and can be changed out at a vendor for a gold cost. Additionally, all characters that share a stash together have the option to equip a minimum value of all found blessings, as long as they have conquered the timeline it is found from. You can even access grand blessings normally found in empowered timelines by just conquering the normal version of the timeline. You can now search timeline echoes with text or via icon. We've made some good improvements to the loot filter. For example, you can now filter for legendary potential and Weaver's Will. Selecting multiple affix conditions is now supported in the user interface. For example, you can have one condition to only show boots with an exalted movement speed prefix, and a second condition to only show those boots if they also have another prefix from a separate selected list. And loot filter rules now have numbers, and we've added an option to show those rule numbers in brackets next to items on the ground to show which loot filter rule is applying to the item. Great for troubleshooting your filter and deepening your understanding of how the loot filter works. We've added 2 different variations of always displaying your endurance threshold on your health bar that can be changed in the gameplay settings.
Wow.
We're thrilled to be bringing you all of this and much more, like visual updates, client performance improvements, tons of bug fixes, network gameplay improvements, and plenty others with our first major post-launch patch. Check out the patch notes for full details, and we'll see you in Last Epoch Patch 1.1, Harbingers of Ruin on July 9th.
Yes! 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 Wow, that looks awesome. Totally amazing. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. This is all of the stuff here. Holy cow, there's so many things to go through. Okay. I don't want to waste any more time on this video, so let's get into it. All new characters can be created in Cycle or Legacy realms. All 1.0 Cycle characters are now moved to Legacy. Those character stashes are also now moved to Legacy, shared amongst similar game modes as usual. Shared stash data includes items, resonances, gold, crafting materials, and faction progress. Each stash from the previous cycle is now available as a remove-only stash in the appropriate Legacy stash. You may remove any of these items on any Legacy character with the same optional challenge settings and use them as normal. Solo character found characters who abandon the challenge will get their SCF stash as a remove-only stash. All right, so Evade, we've already kind of gone over this a little bit, but Evade works similar to movement abilities, but it's not a traversal skill. It's available at level 1, and while evading, players can still take damage, so no immunity frames. Comes with 2 charges and a short cooldown. Evade gains cooldown recovery per speed per character level, can be modified by abilities, affixes, and blessings, can be modified drastically by uniques, and added Evade animations for all classes and transformations. That's wonderful. All transformations. That's amazing. Okay, Pinnacle Bosses. So access to the Pinnacle Boss is initially disabled. Only online cycle characters will have access to the Pinnacle Boss upon release. It will be available to all modes the next business day after someone defeats the Pinnacle Boss, or a week after release, whichever comes first. You must slay 10 Harbingers to gain the ability to change or to challenge the Pinnacle Boss. After completing the Harbinger's questline, you may spend 1 eye to challenge the Pinnacle Boss. Excellent. Each of the 10 Monolith timelines has an associated Harbinger spawned on defeat of the Timeline Boss. Harbingers absorb abilities from the Timeline Boss that spawns them. The first Harbinger is unlocked after you kill a Timeline Boss in the first level 90 normal Monolith timeline. So after you complete the final 91, it becomes available. Harbinger fights can be toggled on or off from the Boss Echo Rewards panel. Subsequent Harbingers are encountered by killing bosses in empowered Monolith timelines at increasingly higher corruption levels. Once a Harbinger has been defeated, it will continue to spawn. Excuse me. In that same empowered timeline, if toggled on. Defeated Harbingers drop Harbinger Eyes. These eyes act as keys to access the Pinnacle Boss. Harbingers are guaranteed drop on the eye on the first kill, with a chance to drop after that. Killing your first Harbinger now unlocks empowered timelines. Because of this, all characters can now get empowered timelines unlocked a bit earlier after conquering the first level 90 timeline instead of the third. So here's an example, right? First character conquers 3 required timelines, unlocks empowered monoliths, can now go conquer empowered timelines for Harbingers. Alt character conquers 1 level 90 normal timeline, empowered monoliths unlock, and can go conquer empowered timelines for Harbingers. Wow. It's actually pretty cool, actually. Kind of speeds up the process a little bit. Forgotten Knights faction tracks your Harbinger progress. There's also a Harbinger quest line. Separate from there, Forgotten Knights is an endgame faction, unlocked after you defeat your first Harbinger. Like the other factions, Forgotten Knights progress is shared amongst characters like a stash. Faction progress is only advanced by the requirements of killing new Harbingers and new timelines at the set level of corruption. Wow, cool. Ranks. These are the ranks for them. I'm sure if you watch the video, you can pause it and take a look at the video and see which each one is, but 40% chance for Nemesis items to include an Egg of the Forgotten, 10% chance for double stability gain, double Harbinger needle drop chance, 6 maximum fortune potential gain by empowering a Nemesis, 20% additional Glyph of Envy drop chance from Harbingers, tiers of sealed affixes added by empowering a Nemesis are 50% higher on average, 1 corruption gaze gain per gaze of Orobyss, blessings roll their value twice and pick the highest roll, double the chance for Harbingers to drop their specific unique, slaying a Harbinger grants 1 additional gaze of Orobyss, Shattered Road Zones added, home of the Forgotten faction. Wow. This is so cool. So cool. Nemesis System. We've already kind of like went over the Nemesis System, but let's jump into this as well. They first appear as a floating pile of armor around the body of a powerful warrior slain by a Harbinger. Clicking on the Nemesis brings up a menu where you can see 4 items from the slain warrior. These items are always rare, exalted, or unique, with bonus chances of being the latter 2. They can't be idols. For characters above level 50, at least 1 will always be a unique. Nemesis type and stats are determined by the zone they spawned in. Nemesis loot rolled is determined by character level. You have 3 options in the menu: banishing, losing access to the items, challenging it, causing you to fight and gain the items, empowering it, causing you to fight it but allowing it to escape through a time rift at the end of the fight. If you empower Nemesis, your next Nemesis counter will feature a time rift instead of the warrior's body, and the items offered will be the same ones as before, but upgraded. Rare and exalted items have their affixes upgraded to tier 7 and also increase your fortune potential beyond the normal limit. They can also gain sealed affixes up to tier 7. Exalted sealed affixes were previously unattainable. Exalted sealed affixes were previously unattainable. Wow. Unique items have a chance of gaining legendary potential or becoming a legendary item with random affixes added to them. You can empower Nemesis up to 2 times before you must challenge it. After banishing or challenging a Nemesis, your next encounter will have a fresh set of items. These items will not change once they've been empowered once. Whenever you defeat a Nemesis, regardless of whether you challenged or empowered it, it will also drop a pile of crafting materials. It will not drop the regular loot to avoid confusion with the 4 items offered. Regardless of whether you challenge or empowered. Okay, cool. So even if you challenge him or empower him, they'll still drop a pile of crafting materials, which is great. High levels Nemesis may carry a special item as one of the rewards, the Egg of the Forgotten. This can be replaced with one of your uniques that lacks legendary potential or Weaver's Will, allowing you to upgrade that unique by empowering the Nemesis. Chance of this item appearing scales from 0% below level 60, then to 20% at level 60, up to 60% at level 100. Rank 1 of the new Forgotten Knights faction provides an additional 40% chance for the Egg of Forgotten to spawn. If you don't replace the egg, it will randomly transform into a different unique. Okay, Nemesis can also drop vengeful weapons that seek out the destruction of the Harbingers that killed them. Wow. Killing a Harbinger while having one of these weapons equipped upgrades it to an avenged version with improved stats. Wow. There are Nemesis weapons for every weapon and offhand type. Holy cow. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay. Bosses no longer have a variable amount of damage reduction based on how quickly they have been taking damage. Instead, bosses have a number of ward breakpoints. And their health is reduced to a breakpoint. They gain ward based on their maximum health. Any extra damage beyond that breakpoint passes through the ward they gain. Their ward decays over time, but with a different formula to player ward. Instead of decay scaling with the amount of ward, it scales with how much time has passed since the boss gained it. More significant bosses such as chapter bosses, timeline bosses, and dungeon bosses have more breakpoints. Most other bosses have 2 breakpoints. Bosses have 50% more effective health against stun and freeze. Added modifiers. Yep, ward decay. We went through this yesterday with the ward decay. It's scales exponentially instead of linearly, which is wonderful. Obviously, you can see that, the more ward you have, the faster it will decay, as opposed to just, the more ward you have, the less it will decay. Glyph of Envy, we've kind of already gone over that. Glyph of Envy is very, very cool. Glyph of Envy destabilizes an item, unpredictably changing all of the properties on the item being upgraded. The stability is siphoned to the most recent monolith timeline you entered, greatly increasing its stability. Forging potential of the item is not changed beyond the normal reduction, and the changes cannot result in affixes above tier 5. Existing sealed affixes cannot be changed. Grants far more stability if you have never completed the timeline before. Great. It is particularly useful for going through non-empowered timelines quickly on all characters. Which timeline will gain stability is indicated in the Forge button before you use the Glyph. The Glyph cannot be used by characters that have never started a Monolith Echo, and Glyph of Envy drops in timelines have similar drop chance to dungeon keys. Awesome. Okay, experience changes for mechanical changes here. Experience requirement in Tome, XP Tome changes. Increased XP requirements of levels 98, 99, and 100 by around 20%, 40%, and 60% respectively. The XP Tome... XP from XP Tomes now scales up less dramatically above level 60. This effect is most noticeable above level 85. XP Tome rewards from Echoes further from the center of the web now contain more XP Tomes, up to a maximum of 7 Tomes. From all XP Tomes, rewards granting 3 Tomes. Reduced XP Tome Echo reward occurrence rate by 29 to 42%, larger values for lower corruption, and lower distance from the center of the Echo web. Minimum skill level changes. Character level thresholds for minimum skill levels. Wow. 8, 12, they just reduce it by 3 each time. 4, 8, 10, 10, 10, and 10. Nice. Reduced experience scaling from corruption at high corruption values. Effective corruption for calculating experience bonus increases at 25% after 300 corruption, i.e. every 100 corruption above 300 is now like 25 corruption above 300 before. Wow, that's excellent. Effective corruption for calculating experience bonus increases at 5% speed after 1000 corruption. Every 100 corruption, okay, cool, is now like 5 corruption above, okay. To avoid reaching a very high corruption feeling necessary for effective farming favor. Change the town scene characters load into. Now characters will always load into the end of time after reaching it, but instead will load into the last visited town scene. Reduce item sell costs, especially early on. Added option to only display enemy health bars once damaged. Improved ability responsiveness online. Added the ability to equip a 2-handed weapon while dual wielding and place those items in your inventory. That's super cool. That's quality of life right there. I love that. Added a waypoint to sync them up with the Architect so that if you die or disconnect during the Lieth or Lagon fights, you don't have to rerun the whole Temple of Lagon and Temple Depth zone. Thank Lord. You can now add multiple affix conditions under the same rule. You can now filter for unique items with specific legendary potential or Weaver's Will. All rules are now numbered top to bottom. The lower the number, the higher the rule's priority. You can now toggle a checkbox to highlight which rule in your filter caused an item to show up on the ground. Added an information to show if an affix cannot drop based on your other conditions under that rule. Add an option in gameplay settings which allows you to toggle your current loot filter by clicking the button instead of holding it. Change the default controller. Okay, this is for controls for controller. Escape menu should always be usable on loading screens and on character select. Deleting characters before they allow you to click the delete button. Yep. Yep. Separated factions, item guides, and endgame factions. Combat mechanics. Taking damage takes from mana before health. Boss ward. Other exiled. Okay. Character stats and menus improvements. Just miscellaneous stuff. Japanese language for all you Japanese players out there. MTX pets. Now master player speed, wonderful. Potion drop changes, adjusted the shape and size of the area in which a potion is considered close to a potential drop location and reduces the chance of another potion dropping there. It is now a 16 radius circle rather than a 30 by 30 square. The total area is similar, 804 compared to 900. Reduce the chance of a potion dropping if it's considered close enough to existing ground potions to bring you to full potions. This chance is now 15% to 20. Added a chance for a potion to not drop if it's considered close to the one existing ground of potion. This chance is 12%. Okay. Monolith of Fate. Forged Soldier Monolith Ambush now only includes 1 Forged Soldier from 2 and additionally has 1 or 2 Armored Phoenixes. Increase gold echo reward occurrence by 2 to 8%. Increase shared echo reward occurrence rate by 7 to 20%. Increased rune echo reward occurrence rate by 10. Oh, this is just basically like the different things that you get from the echoes, right? Just the chances of them appearing. Reduce gold scaling from corruption above 500. Increase gold drops from enemies by 5% globally. Most players will now receive more gold than before from slaying enemies. Excellent. Change Necropolis streets to be less linear. Contain more of the upper Necropolis' areas and have more different spawn points for players and random encounters. Enforce more swarming and rare enemies in each monolith. Help ensure a feeling of minimum monster density and avoid echoes that feel too unrewarding due to a lack of rare enemies. Added a search bar to the timeline map with buttons for common reward searches. This creates a quick way to filter and search for desired echo types and rewards with matching modes highlighted on the map. Gates of Orobyss. Now it grants 12 corruption from a varying amount up to 10. Only 4 gaze can be consumed at once. Only 1 gaze is lost when you die. And guests also gain a gaze of Orobyss when they are offered a blessing in an empowered timeline if they have equivalent empowered run in the same timeline. Blessings are now stored as a stash. So any time that you complete a empowered timeline or a timeline in general, those extra blessings that you get are now saved, and you can swap between them for a gold cost. Defeating the timeline boss or unlocking a new blessing now adds all the current rolled values to your list of available blessings, if higher than previously earned versions, including the blessings you do not select upon unlock. For alt blessings, earned on other characters will share a stash and be usable with their minimum roll values until a better roll is unlocked at the alt character. Excellent. Added cycles drop-down menu. Only cycle characters can now be placed on the ladders. Added level ladders. Ranks characters by total experience points. Displays timestamp. Skull icon indicates whether hardcore characters have died. That's pretty cool. Okay. Total reputation now requires 3.1 million down from 3.3. So a 200,000 less reputation needed, which is actually kind of great. Each rank in the item faction now provides a 5% increased favor gain. At maximum, you receive 60% increased favor gain. Experience now scales less with corruption, as favor gain is tied to this. You will now earn more favor at lower corruption and less favor at extremely high corruption. Adjusted ranks 1 to 10 and added 2 new ranks in the Merchant's Guild and Circle of Fortune. So we went over this yesterday in the blog post that was created. Circle of Fortune as well is created. We went over that yesterday. So let's start looking at skill changes. This is going to be quite a bit, I would imagine, of different things happening in the game right now. So, okay, most channel skills which prevent mana regeneration while channeling have been changed. They do no longer prevent mana regeneration, but 8 mana has been added to their channel costs. Other modifiers to their mana costs have been adjusted when necessary to account for this change. The goal for this change is to reward characters that invest into mana regeneration without negatively impacting those that do not. Okay, Ailments. Frostbite now deals 50 damage from 36. Blind no longer causes enemies to aim erratically. It now makes them unable to critically strike, so that's the new crit strike avoidance. If you can blind every single enemy, you will have crit immunity. Withering now has a maximum of 10 stacks. I think Withering is the poison increase. Deals damage, more poison. Bleeds inflicted by Spirit Plague's Hemorrhage and Laceration Nose now also respect Ailment Conversion. Haste Frenzy and Immobilize can no longer be replaced by stacks with a lower remaining duration. That's great. Attempting to replace a long duration haste stack with a lower duration one will still trigger advent of the erased effect. Fix several cases where self-inflicted ailments were not respecting ailment conversion, such as for Harvest Double-Edged Scythe, Diothaean's Bloody Nib, and Bleeding Heart. Fix a bug, fix an issue, where Sentinel Acolyte Two-Handed Sword will stop looping after a while. Okay, Acolyte. Okay, here we go. Acolyte skill changes. Bone Curse now is a base 300 health. Ossify now grants Bone Person 50% less damage taken per point. Fix a bug where Bone Person did not receive its health scaling. Chaos Bolts. Devour and Damn now grants 5 health gained against cursed enemy from 6 and requires 2 points in Doom's Vindication. Call of Morditas now shows its base freeze rate of 20. Chthonic Fissure. Chaotic. Rupture now grants 13% chance per point to replace Spears with Chaos Bolts. Twisted Waves now grants 1% more torment damage per 3% necrotic resistance per point. Death Seal. Death Seal no longer has a minimum cost of mana of 1. This means that mana cost modifiers are now able to reduce to a 0 cost. That's, oh, I love that. Death Seal is an awesome spell. Blind Flurry no longer blinds the targeted minion and instead grants them 50% less critical strike chance. Infernal Dread can now only refresh Infernal Shades to a maximum of 2 times from unlimited. Okay, that's a nerf, I think. Ghostflame no longer prevents mana regeneration while channeling. Nice. Channel cost 48 instead of 40. Spectral Menace now grants 10 mana cost per point. Spirit of the Dead now grants 10 move speed while channeling. Doom Surge now grants 5 move speed while channeling. Disdain now grants 6% less damage taken per point from ignited, damned, or bleeding enemies while channeling Ghostflame. Disdain now adds +2 channel cost per point, and Fabled Prey no longer gives 10% less damage taken from cursed enemies per point. It now gives 50% chance per point to inflict frailty every second. Spirit of the Dread now increases channel cost by 80% from 50. Wraithform gains +1 dodge rating per intelligence while channeling per point from 10. Okay. Learned Weakness now grants 20% global increased critical strike chance per point if you have hit a cursed enemy with Harvest recently. It now also grants a global 5% crit strike multiplier if you have cursed enemy with Harvest recently. Okay. Profane Veil. Scorn now grants 5% more damage. Vampiric Pool now grants 3% of minion health as ward from 4%. Now extends the duration of Profane Veil by 0.2 seconds per minion consumed from 0.5. Science now grants 1 ward per 15% uncapped necrotic resistance per point from 1 to 5 whenever spirit is revealed inside Profane Veil's area. The axe benefit of Profane Instruments now instantly kills enemies that are below 6% health per point. Reaper Form. Death comes quickly has been removed. Rapid Destruction has been moved to its position. Rapid Destruction now grants 8% increased attack speed and cast speed per point, and also grants 2% increased movement speed per point. New node, Blood Moon Reaver, has been added at Rapid Destruction's previous position. It converts Reap's base damage to physical, grants 10% physical penetration, and converts poison effects from the tree to bleed, and gives Reaper Form visual effects. Fix Leech Mastery Reaper Form in an old icon in the Mastery side panel of the Passage tree. That's awesome. There was a different icon for Reaper Form, which was kind of weird. Summon Skeleton now have baseline 20% chance to inflict poison on hit. Skeleton now gain 8 health per level from 5 and 8 health per intelligence. Bone Armor from all sources, including Skeleton Warriors, now grants 8% less damage taken. Impatience has been removed. Bone Snare no longer has a reduced effect on non-minions. Skeleton Mages now gain 8 health per level and 8 health per intelligence. Bone Armor now just gives the Bone Armor buff, which grants 8% less damage taken. Maximum points has been reduced to 1. Plated Bone has been removed. Okay, Mage skill changes. Which Disintegrate previously relied heavily upon in combination with Ingvar's head to deal competitive damage. Because of this interaction and remove, we are working Disintegrate to improve its baseline power and ability to scale into endgame, which is also introducing more compelling choices into its skill tree. So Gambler's Fallacy and Soul Gambler's Fallacy were items on Soul Bastion that like caused you to have an increased crit chance when you did crit. It gave you 50% less chance to crit. So it was like a trade-off kind of a thing. Base damage and increased effectiveness are now 24 and 480 from 15 and 300, so that's quite a big increase. No longer prevents mana regeneration while channeling, is now 18. Lucomancer's effects have been replaced, has been moved to the required escalation, and now grants a stack of Lucomancer every 2 seconds while channeling, up to 2 stacks. Lucomancer grants 4% more global damage to ignite or shock enemies per point, and 4% global reduced mana cost per point in the last 3 seconds. Its maximum points has been reduced to 3, intensified now also in... Oh my gosh, this is just so many things. New node Resurgence connected to Lucomancer. Disintegrate can begin at level 2. Tendrils now grant 34% chance to cast Lightning Blast. Escalation now grants 40% increased mana cost. Amplification now grants 80% mana cost reduction. Twin Beam now grants 14 mana cost. Unbridled Power's effects have been replaced. I never played with Disintegrate, so I don't know any of these changes. Add a new node, Unleash Power. For 3 seconds while channeling Disintegrate, you cast Static Orb, Volcanic Orb, chosen randomly. Converted Lightning, Static Orb is always chosen. If converted Fire, Volcanic Orb is always chosen. Laser Focus no longer grants 20 mana regen per second while damage enemies with Disintegrate. Hyper Focus effects have been replaced, grants 1% more lightning damage per 8 maximum mana. Extension has been moved and now connects to the center node and to escalation. Added a new node, Flame Vent. In Extension's previous position, you gain a stack of Vent twice per second while channeling Disintegrate, up to a maximum of 2 per point. When you stop channeling, you expend stacks to cast Fireball and nearby enemy once per stack. Fix a bug where paralyzed, more damage stack. Shock did not apply. It also has been changed, gives 2% more direct damage per stack of shock on the target. Its maximum points have been reduced to 3 from 5. Dragon's Tongue effects have been replaced. Now grants 1% more fire damage per 2 intelligence. Magnifies effects have been replaced. It now grants 40% of your chance to ignite on hit. Fire spells as ignite chance per point. Feedback now grants 40% chance to shock feedback now grants 40% chance to shock per second per point. Presidium now grants 1 ward per 3 intellect. Per second per point while channeling from 5 ward per second. It is maximum points has been reduced to 3. Cascade's effects have been replaced and it now grants 10% increased cooldown recovery. Its maximum points has been increased to 2 from 1. Backfire now also requires damaging enemies for 3 seconds cause flame burst. Also fix a bug where backfire was triggering flame burst about 20% less frequently than intended. Catalyst now reduces the time required to cause flame burst by 0.5 seconds per point. Inferno now grants 34% chance per point to cast fire aura while channeling 15%. Its maximum points have been reduced from 3 to 4. Excuse me. Fix a bug with Disintegrate's extension node did not affect the visual length of Disintegrate's beam. Fix an issue with Disintegrate's sound effects. Okay, these are skills that I've used before. Elemental Nova, Luminaire no longer prevents mana regeneration while channeling. It's now 48. Infernal Nova's area increase now only applies to direct cast of Elemental Nova. Flammability for Fireball. Flammability now also gives an equal amount of lightning resistance shred if Fireball has any amount of conversion to lightning. Fire Spray now requires 2 points in Winged Fire. Unchained Fire now requires 3 points in Adept. Firebrand, which was the Spellblade version, I believe. Fix a bug where Charring was given to Firebrand more damage per stack instead of its intended more melee damage per stack. Kindling now grants 10% melee critical strike chance per Firebrand stack per point. Triple Strike now grants 3 added mana cost. Charring no longer grants an added mana cost. Crossfire now grants 10% chance per Firebrand stack. Exothermic now allows you to consume up to 3 Firebrand stacks per point. Ardent Branding now also grants 3% more Firebrand damage per stack. Pyre now grants 6 added mana cost. Hypothermia allows you to consume up to 3 Firebrand stacks per point. Conflagrate now grants 6 added mana cost. Incineration now grants 12% more damage per Firebrand stack. And Searing Bond now grants 12% more damage. Flame Reave. Slash and Burn grants 25% chance to ignite per point. Dancing Flames grants 14% less mana cost from 12 and only reduces range by 5%. Ember Infusion no longer increases mana cost but grants 12% more melee damage from 20% per point. Flame Rush, fix bug where Blazing Flux Nose tree would not grant cooldown reduction. Displaying correctly. Cool. Focus is the item that you use to recover mana. The burst of mana and ward that occurs after channeling 1 second now also recovers 10% of missing mana. Let's change your traversal skill even if you cancel the channeling before the teleporting. Okay, Frostclaw. This is a big one, Frostclaw. Kolheim Ballista now grants 4% increased ice damage per fire rate per point from 5% on Frostclaw hits up to a maximum of 60% from 80. Macau Huitl now consumes 80% of Frostclass mana cost when casting this way and will not trigger at negative mana. On Through the Snow now adds 4 mana cost from 6. Ever Onward adds 4 mana cost from 6. Frozen Malice now adds 2 mana cost from 3. A Crack in the Ice now increases mana cost by 30% from 40%. Gift of Winter's chance to gain 12 mana on cast is now only occurs on direct casts. Close Circuit buff no longer stacks. Its buff now grants 20% increased damage from 15 and 50% increased critical strike chance from 40. Mana Strike. Pulsing Strike now has a 100% chance to knock enemies back. Added a new node called Frigid Grasp that converts mana strike to cold. Fixed a for Runebolt, fixed a bug. Runebolt's Rune Reaver granted 4 mana spent as ward per stack instead of its listed 40. Runic Invocation, Railwind's Frostguard no longer grants 30% damage reduction. Movement nodes have had their values tweaked. The blink, forwards leap, and backwards leap should all be smoother and play and look nicer. Awesome. Wow, a lot for Shatter Strike. Shatter Strike is that like mastery skill for Spellblade where you slash like that. Unrelenting Winter has now a clear description of its effect. Hoarfrost gains now 2 ward when using Shatter Strike and hitting at least 1 enemy per point. Cold Steel now grants 20% critical strike multiplier per point. Cold Presence now grants 10% more damage per point. Glacial Smash now grants 8% more damage per point. Icicles triggered from Ice Spikes now has 100% added damage effectiveness. Whiteout and Absolute Zero now state they give less attack speed and not reduced. Functionality has not changed, only description. Whiteout and Absolute Zero's less attack speed modifiers are now multiplicative with each other. Previously were additive with each other, but multiplicative with other modifiers to attack speed. Whiteout now grants 80% increased mana cost per point. Fixed a bug where Ice Blink was giving more attack speed instead of increased attack speed. Got it, okay. Ice Spikes from Frozen Shrapnel now receive 1 spell damage per 3 melee damage. Lingering Chill now grants 5% global more cold, up to 20%. Ice Barrier now grants 50% Ice Barrier now grants 50 armor per point for 4 seconds on hit, double against frozen enemies. Acclimated now grants 5% less cold damage taken per point, double against frozen enemies. Snap, Freeze. Cryomancer now grants 10% increase for freeze duration per point, and as maximum points are reduced to 4 from 5. Static Orb, Overcharge Detonation now grants 2% more orb hit damage per 1 mana cost from 3%. Oh wow, that's crazy. Fix issues with targeting with the cursor on complex terrain, making it for smoother and more predictable targeting. Okay, Primalist skill changes. Avalanche has gotten like a complete rework, so yeah, let's just jump into this. We've already got 45 minutes into this video, and I'm probably 30% of the way in, so chances are it's going to be about a 2.5 hour video, but whatever, let's do it. Avalanche's base functionality has been reworked. It is no longer a channeled spell by default. Creates 50, it costs 50 mana, creates 1 large boulder at target location, followed by 10 smaller boulders around the target area over 2 seconds. It is now always targetable, and boulders fall within the circle instead of an extended rectangle in front of the player. It has no cooldown. Boulders have 400% added damage, effectiveness from 300, a freeze rate of 80, and the large boulders additionally have 100% more damage and 100% more area of effect. Effects which create avalanche boulders create smaller boulders unless stated otherwise. Pummeling now requires Rockfall. It now causes larger boulders to always create a fissure. From requiring 5 boulders hit on a single enemy. The fissure it creates now lasts 4 seconds from 5 listed, 3 actual. It now has 200% added damage effectiveness per second with an equivalent base damage. You are now limited to 1 fissure from Avalanche at a time. Elemental Bonds effects have been changed and now grants 34% chance per point for large boulders to form into a Coldstone Elemental upon impact. You can have a maximum of 9 Coldstone Elementals. If another would be created beyond the max, it instead fully restores the health and refreshes the decay of the most decayed Elemental. Coldstone Elementals deal 50% more damage. Frost Touch now grants 50% chance per point for larger boulders to create frozen ground. The maximum points have been reduced to 2. The radius of frozen ground has been increased by 47%, and its area is now affected by all modifiers that affect the area of Avalanche's boulders. Shatter Shot now grants 10% more hit damage, doubled against frozen enemies, from only granting 20% more damage to frozen enemies. It now requires Frost instead of Frost Touch. Frosted Front now grants 25% increased area per point for frozen ground. It also grants 50% frostbite chance per point to allies in frozen ground. Its maximum points has been increased to 2. Mountain Peak now makes Avalanche a channel ability from making it targetable. It costs 28 mana per second to channel and causes 1 larger boulder to fall every 1.5 seconds along with 5 smaller boulders every second. Naturally occurring now grants 50% mana efficacy per point, and its maximum points has been reduced to 3. It now requires a Mountain Peak from Wild Path. Precision's effects have been replaced and now causes smaller boulders to fall in a 15% reduced area per point for every second spent channeling, up to a maximum reduction of 60% as maximum 2 points. Wild Path has been removed. Unyielding Storm's effects have been replaced. When you stop channeling Avalanche, it continues for a duration equal to how long you spent channeling, up to a maximum of 1.5 seconds per point, and now requires naturally occurring from Wild Path. But Wild Path has been removed. Crater is now a new node which requires precision. Every third large boulder creates an earthquake upon impact, consuming 90% of Earthquake's mana cost. Dead of Winter now also grants 8% more cold damage per point. Storm Slide now grants added lightning damage instead of base damage. This is a buff, as added damage is affected by damage effectiveness. Heavy Snow has been renamed to Excavation, and now grants 50% increased stun chance, and now grants larger boulders at 50% chance per point to cast upheaval towards a nearby enemy. Upon impact, consuming 80% of its mana cost, its maximum points has been reduced to 2. Stormcaller's new node, which requires Harsh Winter, grants avalanche boulders that hit at least one enemy a 15% chance per point to grant Storm Stack. It also has a maximum of 3 points. Winter Buildup, it now grants 2 reduced mana costs or channel costs from 1. Its maximum points have been reduced to 4. Now requires Harsh Winter. Intensity's effects have been replaced. Now grants small boulders a 5% chance per point to be replaced with a large boulder. Snowstorm now grants 1 additional small boulder per point, or 7% increased frequency of small boulders per point if channeled. If it now adds 3 mana cost per point, its maximum points has been reduced to 3. Alpine Guide's effects have been changed and now grants 34% chance per point for large boulder critical strikes to drop smaller boulder at the same location. These smaller boulders are allowed to critically strike. It now also grants 3% critical strike chance per point. Absorption is a new node that requires Elemental Bond. When a Coldstone Elemental is hit by a boulder, they regain 100 health per point, and gain Frenzy and Haste for 2 seconds per point. Has a maximum of 3 points. Wow. It's basically an entirely new skill, Avalanche. So, if you were playing with Avalanche before, you're probably going to be very excited now because there's a lot of increases that I've read so far. Okay, Earthquake. Bug fix. Consume mana, negative mana. It will not consume mana, but any remaining subsequent hits will not occur. Fix a bug where Snow Crash would trigger while negative mana. Where taking the pack leader node could lead to companions leaping off the map. Yes, that was an issue, I noticed. Gathering Fury's chance to repeat bow abilities could also repeat channeled bow abilities, which would result in 2 seconds occurring simultaneously for as long as the channel is maintained. Cyclone now grants you 1% more physical damage per stack of Maelstrom on you from 5% increased. Violent Squall now grants 200% more damage, 200% increased duration, 200% increased healing from healing wards, or healing winds from 100% more damage, 100% healing. You can only have a maximum of 1 stack of Maelstrom. Sleep-footed now grants 3% increased dodge rating per point. Gathering Storm has been renamed to Growing Storm. It now grants a 2% chance on any hit to cast Maelstrom using the same cooldown. The Tempestuous Idol affix now grants a chance to cast Maelstrom every 3 seconds from every 5 seconds. And Essence of Debris now grants 8% global increased stun chance per stack. Serpent Venom now has a base damage of 400 over 3 seconds. That's great. Slither now grants a buff granting 10% more dodge rating when you use Serpent Strike and hit at least one enemy. This buff's maximum stacks are equivalent to points allocated to a maximum of 3. Previously gave an endlessly stacking buff for 4% more dodge rating per stack. Shroud of Winter now causes Slither to also grant +1 dodge per 1% cold resistance. Shattered Immunity now gives... Wow, that's actually massive. That's a huge increase right there. Shattered Immunity also gives 1% more Serpent Venom per poison from none. 1% more Serpent Venom damage per Frostbite. 1% more Serpent Venom damage per poison against high health enemies. And 1% more Serpent Venom damage per Frostbite against high health enemies. Stormcrows now have 200 base health. Gain 10 health per attunement. Gain 10 health per strength. And 10 health per level. AVs now also grants Stormcrows 10% more health per point. Nimbleness now grants 80 dodge rating. Summon Storm Totem. Pressure Advantage now gives 10% more critical strike chance against shocked enemies per point. Intensity now grants 8% increased mana cost from 15. Frostbite now grants 40% chance to inflict Frostbite each second. Fulgurite Core now also grants Storm Totem 1 spell lighten damage per 1% of your chance to shock attackers. Thunder Totem has been reworked. If you have at least 3 other totems, up to 5 are consumed to instead summon a Thunder Totem, which has a 20% more damage duration, size, and health per totem consumed. Does not consume Storm Totems or Thunder Totems. Add a new node, Unmatched Storms. Storm Totems cast Stormbolt instead of Lightning Strikes, but has 80% less cast speed. The Stormbolt benefit from your Storm Tree and your Gathering Storm Tree. Wow. So 2 different trees the Stormbolts benefit from. Fix a bug where Blizzard. Fix a bug where allocating Blizzard cause exploit weakness and pressure advantage no longer provide their effects. Provided a bug, or fix a bug where Storm Rider was always only triggered by shocks even when Blizzard was allocated. Okay. Summon Thorn Totem. Pillars of Hairrot now only requires 1 point in either Venom Tipped Thorns or Winter Wood. Impale now requires 2 points in Ancient Power. Guided Thorns now requires 3 points in Oaken Protection. Grants 20% reduced cast speed. Memories of Terra now has 4 maximum points. Requires 2 points in either Teutonic Wisdom or Forested Expanse, but grants 3 mana per point. Characters with Thorn Totem Specialized will get a free tree skill respec. Characters with Thorn Totem Specialized will get a free skill tree respec. Cool. Wolves now have 220 base health, gain 12 health per strength, and 12 health per level. That's great. Swarmblade Form. Locust Master no longer adds a cooldown Armblade Slash. It instead completely replaces Armblade Slash Summon Locust. As a result, it can no longer grant a damage buff when hitting Locust with Armblade Slash. Locust Master description still incorrectly mentions the damage buff. The text will be removed in a subsequent update. Locust Master now requires Wasp Flight instead of Viper's Call. Bloodlust Swarm grants Locust Swarm 5% increased damage per bleed. Fix a bug where Locust converted to cold by Frostbite were not treated as cold minions by Gathering Storm's Friends of the Tempest. Tempest Strike. Earthbreaker now grants 40% more, or Upheaval, sorry. Earthbreaker now grants 40% more damage from 30%, also grants 40% increased stun chance. Quarry Master adds 3 mana cost per point from 4. Warcry. Base cooldown is now 18 seconds. Wow. 20% remaining cooldown is now recovered whenever you stun an enemy, including with Warcry itself. This effect can occur maximum 2 times a second. 20% of 18. That's what? It's 3 seconds, I think. No, it's like yeah, it's about 3.5 seconds or something like that. So 7 seconds maximum is what you can reduce it by. That's pretty good. Shallow Breath is now set the cooldown to 5 seconds. Shallow Breath requires Staggering Roar, Eviscerating Howl. Kinetic Stream requires the starting node. Eviscerating Howl requires Kinetic Stream or Shallow Breath. Okay, Rogue skill changes. Let's go through this. I played a Rogue. I played Dancing Strikes with Flurry, and Puncture, Shadow Cascade. Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's go through this. Aerial Assault. Plume Daggers now grants Umbral Blades hits from the Twilight Strike node 100% chance to inflict Armor Shred. Rending Barbs now grants 100% chance to inflict Bleed. Grants you your Falcon 1% bleed chance per 10 dex per point. Its maximum points have been reduced from 2 to from 4. Gustborn Guard guards the health gain from healing dust to ward at 50% reduced effect. Storm on the horizon now removes the traversal movement tags. Fix a bug where Rending Barb's bleed chance for the Falcon lasted 5 seconds and now it lasted 4 seconds, stated in the description. Fixed. Okay, this is more bug fixes for Aerial Assault. Acid Flask, Quick Draw node now grants 6% increased throwing speed per point. And it's been reduced to 4. Alchemical Proficiency now also grants 3% more damage per point. Explosive Flask now only requires 3 points in Alchemical Proficiency. Cluster Bomb now grants 50% increased mana cost from 100. Ballista, Armed Construction now grants the explosion 1% more damage per dexterity. Care Package now only drops its potions over time if the Ballista has been hit. Cinder Strike. Melee Cinder Strike's first strike no longer attempts to auto-aim at nearby enemies. Inferno now grants 8% more damage per point and 2 added fire damage per point. Overexertion now grants 20 added mana cost, and now grants 30% more damage. Tireless now grants 20% mana efficacy per point, and its maximum points has been reduced. Flame Alchemist now grants 25% chance to throw a Volatile Flask when Cinder Strike's first attack hits at least 1 enemy. Its maximum points has been increased from 2. Dancing Strikes, awesome. Grievous Wounds is now spelled correctly from Grievous, and grants 25% bleed chance per point. Silent Death is now grants 100% poison resistance shred per point. Deadly Waltz now grants 25% physical resistance shred per point, and its maximum points has been increased to 4. Hidden Blaze now grants 50% chance to use Shadow Cascade on the first strike. Its maximum points has been increased from 2, and now requires 2 points in Deadly Waltz from 1. Graceful Arena now grants 4% more global damage per point to you and allies in the arena, from 25% increase, and 2% less damage taken per point. Double for yourself, and only 5% for yourself. Its maximum points has been increased from 5 to 4. I don't know. Graceful Arena now is kind of crap. Rhythm now grants 3% more global damage per rhythm stack. From 10%, this is additive with the perfect choreography, but multiplicative with other modifiers. Detonating Arrow. Lightning Tendrils can no longer hit enemies that were hit by explosion, which caused lightning tendrils. Copper Dust's arrows debuff can no longer stack. Arrow of Delay's movement speed buff has been reduced to 4%, and its description has been updated to clarify the stacks from each additional arrow attached. Thunder Steel Arrow now gives 50% more damage from 30%. Infused Discharge now grants 2% more damage per mana consumed. Couple bug fixes for Detonating Arrow. Dive Bomb. Dive Bomb's base damage and damage effectiveness are now 140 and 700%. So that's a nerf for Dive Bomb. Shadow Falcons performing Dive Bombs, such as from On Wings of Shadow, now deal 6% less damage. That's another nerf. Dancing Shadows now grants a 50% chance per point for your Shadow Falcons that landed inside Smoke Bomb to take off and dive again. Its maximum points has been increased to 2, so that's another nerf for Dive Bomb. 3 nerf for Dive Bomb. Smoke Trap's chance to grant Dusk Shroud per second arming is now 30%. Smoke Trap now requires that the trap hit at least 1 enemy in order for its effect to occur. Sky Signal now grants 2% elemental and physical penetration per stack to your Falcon whenever an explosive trap detonates from 3%. It can now be triggered up to 15 times every 3 seconds from no limit. Fix a bug. Exceeding the maximum active trap limit had intentionally caused higher chance to gain Dust Shroud from Smoke Trap node. This is expected to be significantly reduced the amount of Dust Shroud stacks gained in typical use cases. Falcon deals 14% less damage. Raining Talons now grants 25% chance to bleed instead of 50. Falconry now is a throwing minion tag. Go for the Eyes has been reworked. Your critical strike chance modifiers also apply to your Falcon at 75% effectiveness. Picking the highest total value among the 3 modifiers, giving that to the Falcon as additional crit chance at 75%. Avian Arsenal now is a maximum of 5 stacks. Great. Boundless Blows for Flurry. Boundless Blows no longer prevents mana regeneration from casting. Channel cost is now 13. Vile Tactics first strike. Poison chance, second strike, bleed chance, third strike. Poison resistance shred chance, physical resistance shred chance are now 20% per point. Incision now grants 15% critical strike multiplier per point. Deep Strikes now grants 10% more damage. Giant Slayer now increases Adrenaline Rush to grant 50% more damage to bosses and rare enemies. More bug fixes. Hail of Arrows. Endless Barrage no longer prevents mana regeneration while channeling. It is now 23%. from 15 stated, 20 actual. Multi-shot. Wow, a lot for multi-shot. Added damage now applies 100%, 21st. Yeah. Added damage now applies at 120% effectiveness from 100%. Keep pushing them around. Knockback effect now also has a 100% chance that has 2-second cooldown and requires a direct use. Won't back down, has a maximum of 3 arrows fired when out of mana. Pincushions effects have been replaced and now grants 10% physical penetration per point. Toxic Gift no longer makes multi-shot unable to inflict slow. Strong Pull grants 6% more damage. Now only applies to direct uses. Giant Slayer grants 500% increased stun chance. Stand my ground, 12% more damage if you haven't moved in the past second. Large Quiver grants 3 mana cost per point from 4. Efficient Draw grants 12% mana efficacy per point from 10%, and its maximum points have been reduced to 4. No Easy Way Out grants 25% chance to slow on hit per point. Hit and Run grants 50% chance per point to gain haste when you use multi-shot while Stand My Ground is active. Point Blank's description has been updated to clarify that it loses damage steadily as it travels, while introducing maximum damage lost at 22 units. The base distance multi-shot arrows travel. Back-to-back now doubles every 6th attack from every 8th attack, but only applies to direct uses. Repeater Bow reduces the number of attacks needed for back-to-back by 1, but also grants 3% more damage. Heavy Arrows now grants 10% increased chance to inflict armor shred per arrow that would be fired, counting arrows before the limit is applied. Alright, fixed more bug fixes. Net. We're about halfway through, so yeah, it's going to be about another hour talking about this, which is okay. Let's just do it. I'm looking forward to the Sentinel changes. Trapper's Crescendo now grants 1% more damage per 1% dodge. Efficacious Toxins now causes enemies to take 12% increased damage over time, with 25% chance to apply it on hit per point, and its maximum points is reduced. Death's Imprint chance to inflict Shadow Daggers is now doubled for direct use as a puncture. Wow, that's awesome. Fix the bug. Shadow Cascade Hurricane Ablaze no longer states that it prevents mana regeneration while channeling. It did not actually prevent mana regeneration. Channel cost is now 40 from 50. You're now limited to a maximum of 2 smoke bombs active at once. This is typically only relevant if Cloaked Incursion is allocated and you are utilizing sources of cooldown reduction. Synchronized Strike. The player was stunned mid-cast. Umbral Blade. Cacophony of Steel. Blade Storms now receive 40% less chance to inflict Shadow Daggers from Lethal Darkness. Backstab now grants 28% more recalled blade damage. Bloody Trail now grants 10% more recalled blade hit damage per slow. And another bug fix for Umbral Blades. Okay, thing we've all been waiting for. Sentinel skill changes. My favorite class, the class I'm going to play for Cycle 2 launch. So let's get into this. Okay, Anomaly. Temporal Prison now grants 10% increased time lock duration per point. Time lock now also adds 8 seconds to Anomaly's cooldown. Fix a bug where time lock could affect bosses. Okay, good. Very happy that time lock is getting a little bit of a buff. Erasing Strike. Fix a bug where Void Beams from Ravenous Void did not visually move. Void Beams did not receive the Strength of Vitality. Did not affect Void Beams from Ravenous Void. Obliteration was not providing the listed Void spell damage to Void Beams. Or implemented destruction and erasure of living were not providing their more damage or more void damage to Void Beams created by... Okay. Forge Strike. Temper now grants 4 melee damage per point, and now also grants 10% more fire damage per point. Anvil Blow no longer grants 15% physical damage, and now grants 20% less attack speed and 50% more physical damage when directly used. Reinforced Weapon now grants 4% global more damage per point if you've used Forge Strike recently from 20%. Rending Descent now grants Forge Strike 5% increased armor shred duration and effect per point. Forge Master now has 30% chance to convert weapons to create axes from 20% with 100% increased area and 20% more damage but 10% less attack speed. Detonating Ground has 300% chance ignite chance. Ignited Ground now grants Detonating Ground 100% ignite chance and increases ignite duration caused by Detonating Ground by 10% per point. Lava Burn now grants Detonating Ground 40% more hit damage per point. Okay, Forged Weapons. Now have a base health of 350. Their attacks now have a base damage of 2. That's a nerf. Deal 4.1% more damage. These damage changes are intended to reduce the power in very early game while preserving or buffing their damage in endgame by raising the relative impact of your weapon on their power. Hammer Throw. Disintegrating Aura now grants 8 mana cost from 12, and its damage and damaged effectiveness has been increased from 8 and 200%. Rapid Disintegration maximum points has been reduced. When fully investing into Disintegrating Aura and Rapid Disintegration, the Disintegrating Aura now deals 28% more damage than before. Okay, Healing Hands. We all knew that this was going to get a big fix, so let's see. Unbroken Prayer no longer states that it prevents mana regeneration while channeling. It did not actually prevent mana regeneration. Channel cost is now 10 from 8. Healing Hands base upfront healing is now 50. Divine Barrier now converts 20% of Healing Hands healing to ward from 100%. When affecting an ally with missing health gained as ward per second, it does not restore health for that player. Urgent Healing now grants 20 upfront healing from 35. Okay. Fix a bug where Divine Barrier did not convert. Fix a bug where Bane of Evil's effect was ignoring healing effectiveness. Removed incorrectly electrify alt text on various nodes. Added a fire tag when enabling damage or taking Skyfall node. No longer removes the spell tag when taking the melee node if you also have the Skyfall node. Fix a bug where Skybeam from Healing Hand Skyfall was not affected by other nodes. In the Healing Hands tree, such as Virtue of Patience, Cleric's Wrath, Bane of Evil, and Blessed Pariah. Okay, so I feel like it's a nerf for Healing Hands. considerably with this, the Healing Hand base, and also this as well, and also 20% of Healing converted to ward from 100%. So that's where a lot of the ward generation was coming from. It was giving 100% of the healing as opposed to only 20% of the healing. So, Javelin. If you have a spear equipped, added melee damage from the spears applies to Javelin's added throw damage at 50% is normal value. Strategic Patience now grants 6% more damage, 20% less attack speed. Divine Fury now grants 2 mana cost. Shred Javelin now grants 30% chance to shred armor. Judgment. Judgment Consecrated Ground turned into an aura by Anointed was misaligned from the player in offline play. Consecrated Ground now has a damage effectiveness per second 375 with an equivalent base damage per second. Flaming Soul now grants 35% more Consecrated Ground damage. Purifying Flame grants 30% more Consecrated Ground damage against ignited enemies. Lingering Force grants 15% increased damage to Consecrated Ground. Pious Offering grants 1% more damage per 2 mana. Oh, that's a nerf. That's a big nerf right there. 2% less damage per 2 mana consumed. Okay. Sometimes freezing the character, great. Heated Metal now grants 40% Ignite chance per point. Burning Armor now also grants 10% more fire damage per point. Redistributed Steel now grants 15% more damage and 6% less armor per point. Oh, nice. No longer less health. Oh, yes, that's excellent. So it awesome. That's a big buff for Manifest Armor. Whirlwind Strike now has a 300% added damage effectiveness and a 4-second cooldown. Wow, that's also very awesome as well. Reave, okay. Laceration now has a base damage equal to 200% of your added melee damage from 100%. Indomitable Energy Wave now has a base damage and effectiveness of 30 and 150%, and no longer requires being at high health to trigger. It now consumes 4 mana to trigger as long as you are not at negative mana. Focus Strike now requires 3 points in concentration and now grants doubled critical strike chance for the third strike from guaranteed critical strike. Ooh, big nerf. Ooh, big nerf. Doubled critical strike chance for the third strike from guaranteed critical strike for the third strike. Now also grants 50%. Ooh, big nerf. Flame Drinker now has a maximum stacks of 20 from no maximum. Fixed two-handed sword animation Reave. Okay. Shield Rush. Did not receive the Vitality Scaling. Desynchronous Charge now removes Shield Rush's traversal tag. This change won't be reflected in the description yet. Shield Row. Heavy Shield now grants 6 throwing damage from 5. Sharpened Rim now grants 2% increased critical strike chance, and its maximum points has been reduced. Avenging Wrath now grants 2% increased critical strike multiplier from 100 block effect from 1% per 100. Now requires 3 points. Shield Barrage now grants 25 less damage. Fixed Initial where Testament of Light without increasing the effects of Aegis. Shield Bash. Base cooldown now 18. 20% removing is recovered whenever you stun an enemy, including with the Shield Bash itself. The effect can occur maximum 2 times a second. Added a new node, connecting the Cutting Edge and Flurry of Blows. Grants 1 melee damage per 40 block effectiveness per point. Flurry of Blows now grants 9 mana cost. Iron Arms now grants 1% more physical damage per 4 strength. No longer grants increased mana cost from 10. Serrating Strikes now grants 15% increased mana cost per point. Concussive Attacks maximum points has been reduced. Invigoration has been replaced with High Impact, which grants 8% more damage per point, maximum 5 points. Daze now grants 12% increased stun duration. Conjurer now has a 100% chance to cause 1 enemy to drop a potion. Steel Coating now grants 9 melee physical damage, and online play repeatedly casting Shield Bash with it would result in frequent failed casts due to it trying to cast in before previous cast had finished. Oh, okay. The Kingdom Fix for Adorned Raya Idols is now grants 10% to 25% chance to trigger Smite on throwing. Wow, from 4 to 9, that's a huge buff. Holy smokes. Now trigger limit of 10 times per 2 seconds from no limit. Void conversion from Smite. Passive node do not have priority over the lightning conversion from Smite's Order of Lagon node. In the specific case of ailment conversions, Smite's ignites will now always be converted to slow when temporal corruption is allocated. Void Beam, Slip Skills, or Shield Rush now have an added damage effectiveness per second of 300% with an equivalent base damage value. Warpath no longer prevents mana regeneration while channeling. Channel cost now 18. Gore Bringer's increased bleed damage is now converted to Ignite. Or Timeout if Warpath is converted to Fire Void. Fix a bug. Okay, so all around, I want to say that Sentinel didn't get that much of a nerf. Healing Hands got a nerf. Reave got a nerf. I'm actually thinking of maybe doing like a Vengeance build now. Vengeance Healing Hands, just because there's extra damage reduction with Vengeance. And Reave doesn't get that 3% or that 100% increased crit chance on the third strike. So, okay, passive changes to the Acolyte. Passive changes. So these are like skill tree passives when you level up and you put points in your skill tree. Warlock's Mastery bonus now grants 4% more damage per curse. Ward of Malevolence now grants 1 ward per 3 intelligence while channeling. Doom Herald now grants 2% less damage taken when channeling and 2% more damage to damned enemies. Aspect of the Death grants 400 more damage per stack of each negative ailment on you per point from 0.1, so that's a nerf. This node previously stated it scaled with points allocated, but it did not. The result is that at maximum investment, this node can now give up to 18% more damage at 90 stacks compared to the 9% damage at 90 stacks was given before. Okay, cool. For Mage, Spellblade. Burden Knowledge now grants 5 spell damage per point. Prismatic Blades effects have been replaced. It now grants 1 dexterity per point and 1 added melee damage per point. The added melee damage is doubled using a sword. It now also has a threshold bonus, which grants 8% increased attack speed. Frozen Steel now has a threshold bonus, which grants 6% more damage to shield or frozen enemies. Prodigy now has a threshold bonus, which grants 1% critical strike chance per 15 intelligence. First Mastery bonus now grants 12 ward gained when you use a melee attack and hit at least 1 enemy. Nice, that's a buff. Arcane Ward now grants 3 ward per point, gained when using melee attack and hit at least an enemy, but also gives 1 intelligence per point. It now also has a threshold bonus which grants 1 ward decay threshold per intelligence. Flamewalker now has a threshold bonus, which grants each stack of fire aura a 50% chance to shred fire resistance every second. This can be converted to cold or lightning shred by freezing aura or crackling aura. Centering aura no longer gives 3 base damage per second per fire aura. It now gives 1 intelligence per point and has a threshold bonus which grants fire aura 2 spell damage per point of intelligence. It still gives fire aura 15% chance per area per point. Defender of Welrun's effects have been replaced. Now gives 1 dexterity per point and has a threshold bonus which grants 8% increased critical strike chance per point of dexterity. Off Strike now grants +2 melee damage per point, and no longer grants 6% increased shock duration with melee attack per point. It instead grants 1% parry chance per point. Riverblade now grants +2 melee cold damage per point. Volca's Razor now grants 3% more melee damage, with high cost melee skills from 15. Its maximum points has been reduced to 6. Mana Reaver now grants 20% chance per point to gain 3 mana. Nice. From 6 point. That's pretty cool. Warden's Echo now grants 4% chance per point to cast Frostclaw. Consumes 80% of Frostclaw's mana cost when cast this way. Okay, so that was Spellblade. We're going on to Rune Master. Arcane Focus now grants 2 ward gain on direct spellcast per point. Mental Catalyst now grants 6% reduced bonus damage from critical strikes with a catalyst per point. Edict of Scion now grants 2 ward gain per active rune on area skill use per point, and now requires that area skill hit at least 1 enemy. Celestial's Doom threshold bonus now grants 100 ward gain when you hit an upgraded enemy or a rare enemy with a spell with a 1 second cooldown. Jagged Veil now grants 28 ward on crit per point, up to 5 times a second. Ancient Inscriptions threshold bonus now grants 1% increased cooldown recovery per 6 intelligence. That's a nerf. Inscribed Instruments now grant 8% critical strike multiplier with a wand per point. Okay, Sorcerer. And then we go on the Primalist. Okay, cool. Second Mastery bonus now grants 1% more spell damage per 2 mana cost, up to 50% more. From 1% increased spell damage per mana cost, unlimited. Spell. So, 25. Okay, so. Mana Shell no longer gives 15 armor per point, now gives you 2 ward per second per point, and now also has a threshold bonus which grants 1 ward per second per 10 max mana. Lost Knowledge grants 1 ward gain per 15 current mana when you use a skill that costs at least 40. Wisdom's threshold bonus now grants 5% increased mana regeneration per 100 max mana. Arcane Avalanche now also grants 5% shield chance per point, and its effect, which freezes nearby enemies on a 10-second cooldown, is now a 5-point threshold bonus. It now always freezes 8 nearby enemies from 1 point allocated. Arcane Current's effects have been replaced. It now grants 1% more lightning damage to shocked enemies per point, and that's a threshold bonus which grants 100% bonus chance to inflict Spark Charge on hit with skills that cost at least 40 mana. Archmage still grants +1 spell damage per point, but is no longer tripled if you have 200 maximum mana. It now also grants 7% chance per point to refund 20% of mana cost. Both of these effects are doubled with at least 300 mana or tripled with at least 1,000 mana. Pyromancer no longer grants 15% free throw multiplier per point, now grants 5% frostbite chance with cold skills. Pyromancer now grants 5% chance. Pyromancer now grants 5% ignite chance with fire skills per point. Serunomancer now grants 5% shock chance with lightning skills per point. Inferno effects have been replaced and now grants 8% increased fire damage over time, 8% spreading flame chance with fire skills, and a threshold bonus which grants 15% more fire damage over time to enemies with spreading flames. Dragon Mage has been replaced with Mana Bulwark. It grants 2% of damage taken from mana before health per point, and +4 mana per point. Dragon's Breath effects have been replaced, now grants 7% increased elemental damage per point and 4% increased area for skills per point. Spellslinger now grants 3% increased cast speed per point from 3% increased mana regeneration per point. Arcane Insight no longer grants a chance to gain insight on hit. Elixir Knowledge now grants 5% increased mana reduction, or 5% increased mana regeneration per point. Mirror Breath has been replaced with Mana Well. It grants 3% increased mana per point and has a threshold bonus, which grants 50% mana spent gained as ward. Recollection has a maximum 5 points from 4. Okay. Primalist. And then Rogue, and then Sentinel. Cool. Berserk has been renamed to Cornered Beast. Its effect are now also active for 5 seconds after you leave low health, and a buff icon has been added to display when it is active. Beastmaster. Porcine Constitution has been moved beyond the lock, taking the position Envenom was at, and now it grants 4% chance per point to gain Aspect of the Boar on melee hit. Second node named Warheart, which gave 1 strength per point and 4% chance per point to gain Aspect of the Boar on melee hit, has been removed, and Venom has been moved to its position. Added a new node, Natural Fortitude, at Porcine's Constitution, previous position. It now grants 1 strength per point, 2 added health regeneration per point, and 3 added health regeneration for companions per point. It has a threshold bonus which grants 2% increased health regeneration per point of strength for you and your companions. Alright, Shamans. I know Shamans need some love. Shattered Heavens now also grants 20% frostbite chance per point and grants 2 minions 10% frostbite chance per point and 1 added cold damage with spells and attacks. Silent Protector's added armor is now also granted to your totems. Tempest Form's added health, chill chance, and shock chance are now granted to your minions. Aethern Supremacy no longer grants stun avoidance per point. It grants 8 endurance threshold per point and has a threshold bonus which grants 5 stun avoidance per attunement. Fist of Stone now also grants 2% endurance per point and has a threshold bonus which grants 1% health regeneration per 1% uncapped endurance. That's pretty cool. Windbringers increase cold damage, increase physical damage, and added dodge rating, and now also granted to your minions, and now also has a threshold bonus which grants 20% increased dodge rating for you and your minions. Hailbringers, Chill Chance, Freeze Ray Multiplier, and Cold Resistance are now also granted to your minions. Avatar of Thunder now has a threshold bonus which grants 2% spell lightning penetration for you and your minions per 5 attunement. Ironbark has been replaced, now gives 10 additional health and armor per point, triples for totems, and has a threshold bonus which grants 1 health regeneration per 3 attunement, triples for totems. This threshold bonus also gives totems stun immunity. Conflux's area for skills is now also granted to your totems. Sky Armor has been renamed to Gift of the Skies, and his effect has been replaced. Now gives 2% increased attack speed and cast speed per point, and has 8 dodge rating per point. Its maximum points has been reduced. And now it's a threshold bonus that causes your totems to gain Frenzy for 3 seconds when they are directly summoned. Swirling Maelstrom's chance to cast Maelstrom when hit now has a cooldown of 3 seconds from 5, and it now has a threshold bonus granting 20 endurance threshold per stack of Maelstrom. Glacial Strike's threshold bonus has been changed to grant 1% passive cold penetration per 3 strength. Previously, 40 added melee damage every 3 seconds. Ascendant Circles have been replaced, now gives 1% more spell damage per point when you have a totem. Stormblade's effects have been replaced, and now gives 1% more melee damage per point when you have a totem. Elemental Shrine's threshold bonus now gives 1% increased mana regeneration per attunement. Oh wow, that's a buff. Eternal Storm's effects have been replaced, now gives 1% chance. Now gives 10% increased totem duration per point and 7% increased minion cold and minion lightning damage per point. Its maximum points has been increased. And Protective Circle also grants your totems 3% all resistances per point. Okay, Rogues, and then Sentinels. Awesome. And we're only about halfway through, so we got another long way to go. At least 100 or more changes. Okay. Blade Dancer, Skia Synthesis now has a threshold bonus which grants 50% more shadow damage. Yeah, 50% more shadow daggers damage to bosses from your enemies. Death's Door effects are now active for 5 seconds after you leave low health, and a buff icon has been added to display when it's active. Falconer. Finesse Them's threshold bonus grants 1% minion critical strike multiplier per 3% critical strike avoidance. Marksman is concentration, grants 2% more damage per point. Missile Mastery now is threshold bonus which grants 50% increased effect of armor shred. Meditation now grants 40 dodge rating per point, 8% reduced cooldown of concentration, and its maximum points has been reduced. Reflection now has a threshold bonus which grants 10% less damage, less hit damage with concentration. Elemental Arrows no longer requires you to be moving to gain 1 elemental arrow each second. Siege Quiver no longer grants 1% elemental resistance per point per elemental arrow. It now grants 15 war gain per point when you use elemental arrows. Focus Fire now has a threshold bonus which grants 1 second of haste after using Evade. Barbed Arrows now has a 3%. Barbed Arrows now has a threshold bonus which grants 50% chance to shred physical resistance. Poison Tipped Arrows now has a threshold bonus which grants 20% increased poison duration. Ethereal Arrows now grants 10% of bow skill mana cost as more damage per point. Assassin's Quiver grants plus 1 bonus bow damage per point. And it now has a threshold bonus which grants 2% bow critical strike chance. Its maximum points has been increased to 8. Sniper's Gambit grants 6% bow damage per point from 5 and 1% increased damage taken from nearby enemies. Okay. Sentinels will receive an automatic free respec for the passive tree. Does it say that for the other ones? No, it doesn't. Okay, so cool. Time and Faith now grants 2% missing health restored per point when you directly use Reave, Smite, Vengeance, or Multi-Strike. Time and Faith from 5 health per point. Now grants 2% of missing health restored per point. Relentless now grants 50 stun avoidance per point, and now also has a threshold bonus which grants 100% increased stun duration of stun immunity from being stunned. Forge Guard. Okay, second mastery bonus to Stalwart buff now grants 10% increased armor for each hit you have taken in the last 10 seconds, up to 10 stacks. Unflinching now grants 100 stun avoidance per point, and now grants 6 health per point. Crushing Blows has a 1% more damage, and 1% mana cost. Its maximum points has been reduced. Shieldbreaker now only adds 3 mana cost to throwing skills. Steel Aegis now also grants 3 armor per point. Its non-scaling 2% block chance has been moved to a threshold bonus, which now grants 3% block chance. Fresh from the Forge effects have been replaced and now grants 1 melee physical damage, 1 melee fire damage, 1 throwing physical damage, and 1 throwing fire damage per point. Now has a threshold bonus which grants 20% physical pen and 20% fire pen to Smelter's Wrath and Forge Strike. Iron Attunement has now a threshold bonus which grants 1% of armor mitigation percentage and applies 2 damage over time taken per 2 attunement. Champion of the Forge's effects have been replaced and now grants 10% increased critical strike chance if you're using a 2-handed weapon. It also has a threshold bonus which grants 1% critical multiplier per 2 strength if you're using a 2-handed weapon. Hammer and Anvil's effects have been replaced. Now gives you and your minions 20% chance to shred armor per point. Also has a threshold bonus which grants your minions 30% increased attack speed for 3 seconds when you directly use an ability that costs 20 or more mana. Iron Reflexes now also has 2% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes. Its non-scaling conversion of dodge rating to armor has been moved to a threshold bonus. Molded by the Forge's effects have been replaced and have been renamed to Master of Arms. Now grants 1% parry chance, 3% attack speed per point when dual wielding, 2 strength per point when you use a 2-handed weapon, and 6% frailty chance and 3% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes with shield. Shield Crafters increased minion health and increased minion armor have been reduced. to 40% per point. It now also grants a 10% chance per point to summon a single shield from Ring of Shield when you block, which can trigger up to 3 times every 6 seconds, previously 1% chance. It now grants a 20 block effectiveness per point per active shield from Ring of Shields. Thorn Mail now has a threshold bonus, which grants 5 damage reflected to attackers per 1% armor mitigation. Infinite Bulwarks, increased armor on potion now applies to your minions. It now has a threshold bonus which causes you to heal your minions for an amount equal to your armor when you use a potion. Osprey's Bane's effects have been replaced and now swap names with Walls of Solarium. It now grants 1% less damage taken per point, doubled if you have at least 50% block chance. It now grants a non-scaling 3% block chance. Its maximum points has been reduced. Walls of Solarium has swapped names with Osprey's Bane. Its effects now apply to your minions and now has a threshold bonus which grants 1% less fire damage taken per 10% over capped fire resistance. Flawless Defender now gives 75 armor per point and no longer has the non-scaling 3% block chance. Lethal Strikes now has a threshold bonus which grants 1% physical and fire penetration per 5 strength. Avatar of War's effects have been replaced and now grants 8% increased physical and fire damage and 8% increased minion and physical minion fire damage, and now has a threshold bonus which consumes all stacks of Stalwart when you directly use a melee or throwing area attack that costs at least 10 mana, granting the skill 10% increased area per stack consumed. Its maximum points has been increased from 8 to 1. Javelineer has had a threshold bonus which grants 1% throwing critical strike chance for 5 dexterity. Folded Steel now also has a 2% increased duration per point for forged weapons, and its non-scaling bonus of +2 max forged weapons has been moved to a threshold bonus. Guardian now grants 10% increased stun chance per point from 6%, also grants 8% increased health regeneration per point. So I don't see any Paladin on here. No Paladin. Okay, cool. The first Mastery bonus now grants 1% more melee and void damage per 3 vitality. Previously 75% increased melee void damage, not scaling. That's a nerf. Wow. That's a nerf. Eternal Form now also has threshold bonus which grants 2 health per vitality. Okay, general changes for item changes. So took us about an hour and a half to get through all the skill changes, all the ability changes, all the passive changes, and now we're going to go into item changes. So Seal the Fix text color has been changed back to beige, changed to white in 1.0, making it clear they're a separate category to other fixes. Added health regen now rolls on amulets instead of boots. Increased health regen can no longer roll on boots or amulets. Added a dodge rating while evading, and increased dodge rating suffix that only rolls on boots. Increased dodge rating suffix can no longer roll on boots. Some bug fixes. Boots changes. Leather boots grant 8% movement speed. Iron boots, okay, these are just movement speed increase. Rear shining props now grants celestial boots instead. Rain dance now grants 10-13, now grants 10% or 13-20. Snowdrift. Okay, wand implicits. 3 to 4, 3 to 4, 3 to 4. Wow. 3 to 5, nice. Staff 3 to 4, 3 to 5, 3 to 5. Fixed value changes. T6 grants 150, 190 armor, 191, 260. That's great. So more from the base. Health gain on block. Let's see, 50 to 75. That's wonderful. Added block chance. Let's see, added block effectiveness. Wow, that's awesome. Added dodge rating, added health, added mana, added melee damage, stun avoidance, spell damage for swords, chance to bleed, or blind, or chill, or ignite, or poison, or shock, or slow. Added health regen. That's a buff for health regen. Increased armor. That's a buff for armor. Increased dodge rating, increased health. That's just the 1%. And that's also 1% as well. Increased mana regen. Wow, that's really cool. Melee damage gets a huge buff right there. All this melee damage. 10 to 19, 20 to 30, 30 to 34. Nice. T7 grants. Let's see, Discrepancy starts pulling away from Tier 5, and then Tier 6 is massive. Tier 7 is even more massive. Okay. 14 to 16 from rolled attribute. Attunement. 10 to 12, 14 to 16. From 13 to 16. Percent damage reflected. 100% damage percent reflected. Nice. Thorns. That's getting above. Endurance is getting above. Added bow damage. Health and stun avoidance. Hybrid affix. Experimental dodge rating and endurance. Mana cost and mana regeneration. Can no longer roll on scepters. Ooh. Ooh. Increased mana regen. Awesome. 3642, 4655. That's a nerf. Okay, so mana regen's getting a nerf. Experimental zombie, volatile zombie on potion use. That's getting a nerf as well. Mana on potion use. Mana regen for 4 seconds on potion use. Freeze rate per stack of chill. That's a nerf. Experimental traversal cooldown on potion use. That's a nerf. See, previously it was like the previous one, right? 0.7 is 0.7, 89, 89, 12, 12, yeah. Increased chance to find potions. Yep, bow crit. And attack speed. Okie dokie. Unique items. Added 30 unique items. Null's Tooth, Razor Fall, Sword Catcher, Black Blade of Chaos, Orion Sunseal, Cruelty, Traitor's Tongue, Scales of Luminescence, Scales of Luminescate, Bane of Winter, Polaris' Sacred Light, The Inevitable, Phantom's Grips, Runes, Penance, Flight of the Khazarti, Tribolectra, Plague, Dragon's Tongue, Nihilus, Wall of Nothing, Aberoth's Commands, Stealth, Seed of Extrasil, Null Portent, Fingers of the Phantomire, Carcinogen of the Momentum, Phase Point, Grim Construction, Momentum, Monument of Protection, Event Horizon, World Splitter, Flames of Midnight, and Celestial Doom. Okay. Bastion of Honor, Baldur's Wrath, effective level for Legendary Potential is now 80. Effective level for Legendary Potential. Cool. These are all buffs. Cradle of the Erase grants 8% block chance per set Golden Aegis. That's a nerf. Gain a block. That's a buff though with the ward and 1% block effectiveness per 1% total uncapped resistance from 2 per 1%. Wow, so many. Crit chance no longer applies channel skill, no longer afflicted in tooltip DPS. Soul Gambler's Fallacy now has an effective level for Legendary Potential. Soul Gambler's Fallacy now has flavor text. Okay, just so many uniques that are changing. Reducing the effective legendary potential is what a lot of them are. Single cast from an unlimited amount. It now gains 3% spell damage for each minute consumed. The buff can stack endlessly. Wraith Lord's Stinging Beam ability now has a base damage and damage effectiveness of 40. Okay. Wrong Warp. Now locks enemies with 4 meters of destination. Okay. So lots of uniques that have been changed. Enemies balance. Damage Ice Breath scales up over the duration cast from 50 to 100%. Blood Scorpion deal 24 less poison damage. Hitbox of Trial Metal Beam of Gaspar's more tightly matched visuals. Force Shoulder. Increased duration of flamethrower attacks. Melee attacks are 20% slower. Flamethrower deals 11% less damage. Gorgon Sand Twister deals 17% less damage. Ice Stab attack. Ostrix Light Mage, which I hate. 12% less fire damage. Leap deals 17% less damage from 50%. Possessed Construct and Soulfire Bastion added a failsafe to ensure that their entrance animation will not overwrite any ability animations. Wouldn't play and play too quickly. Sacred Bloom. Saiyan Scorpion. Less poison damage. Time till detonation of Thrown Javelin ability. 1.6. Change visuals to better reflect and indicate impending explosion. Siege Golem. Solar Archer. Less damage. Now tracks your movement slightly less. Now tracks your movement slightly less well before leaping. Now idles 1.3 seconds after howling. Reduced damage by 15%. Now tracks your movement slightly less well before leaping. Now always turn to the target before shooting their lightning beams at the rate of lightning beams has been reduced. Deals 0.7% less melee damage. Teeming Husk. Reduced size by 30. Damage Ice Breath. Cast from 50 to 100. Reduced leap attack damage from 60 to 30. Melee attacks reduced from 40 to 26. Ice Breath has 25% less chance to inflict Frostbite. Cool. Undead Hydra. Reverse full duration. Void Prophet. 44% more health. Void Fused Armor. These changes are intended to make them more rewarding to kill as they are decently tanky but often not worth killing. Okay, cool. Yeah, they were usually really tanky, the Void Fused Armors. 50% more experience, less void damage. Wingard Shaman, shield buff range reduced. Okay, cosmetics. Above the character's head, cosmetics, Immortal Supporters and above now corresponding Abyssal Vanquisher, Abyssal Legends. MTX weapons of different than the MTX weapon, only if the weapon has similar animations. Example, one-handed sword, axe, or mace are interchangeable. Tooltip now lists all eligible equip some one-handed items in the offhand slot. You can now equip the same MTX and offhand as a main hand at once. 4 new pets, 4 new armor sets, 4 new helms, 6 new back slots, 8 new weapons, 5 new portals, and 4 new supporter packs. Wow. Visual and sound. Oh my goodness. We're almost finished. Almost done. It's coming to about 2 hours, and I'll have chapters for everything here. Disintegrate's new sound effects. Healing Hand's been new bass sound. Zone's new music. Monolith of Fates. All those new music, visual effects. For Ice Goliath, animation. Bug fixes. Level design, controls, UI, campaign. Monolith. Multiplayer. All these multiplayer bug fixes. I'm not going to go through any of this. Enemies. Fix the Abyssal Fiend for not dropping any loot. Lagon's tentacles would have different number of ward breakpoints than Lagon himself. Death animation for Son of Art in one play. Improved post-processing. Visual, other bug fixes. Holy mackerel. Holy mackerel. That was a lot. That was an immense number. An hour and 50 minutes. It took me to go through every single... Well, not every single. I didn't go through this. The bug fixes here. But basically everything else, right? And I'll have chapters down below, so if you guys like this, if you want to see more stuff like this, it just came out about 2 hours ago, and I've gone through everything for everybody. There will be chapters at the bottom. If you enjoyed watching this, let me know. I will be there July 9th playing Last Epoch. And July 8th, its servers are going to be down. So to prepare for servers, we're shutting down our servers 24 hours before the patch starting at July 8th at 9 o'clock. So July 8th, the servers will be offline. so they can get ready to post this patch. Yeah, this is massive, absolutely massive. So if you think I earned your subscription, please give me that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like the video and comment on things that you think would be great to have, or things that you've been waiting for, changes you've been waiting for. Maybe I missed something that was a very important change to a class that you play. But let me know what you guys think. Until then, we will turn it off, and I will see you guys in another video. Have a good one.